So since the beginning of human existence, the ways in which we've gathered have changed, but the reasons that we've come together have not. Because we are pro-social creatures who biologically evolved to being something greater than ourselves. I think we all feel that here today. We need one another, and without strong and lasting connections to family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors, and without the relationships we create over a lifetime, we cannot survive, let alone thrive. Supporting this core human imperative to live in community is our unique human ability to creatively share our thoughts, ideas, and emotions. We love this quote: art creates culture, culture creates community, and community creates humanity. And I have to say, I feel, and I'm going to get all emotional, but we've created a great community here. I'm loving it. So we are in many communities throughout our lives, and there are many communities that we will never be a part of. But by the way, let's stay a part of this one, okay? But the power of community has the ability to open hearts and minds, to solve big problems, and to live fuller and healthier lives through the arts and aesthetic experiences. And now, I would like to introduce Gary Muzinski, award-winning musician, to bring this community together before our next panel that will be moderated by Van Jones. Van Jones, oh, there he is. Man, I've been looking for you all day. Van Jones, CNN host and social entrepreneur. Gary, take it away.
So I invite you to join me. So just tune into your own egg sound. Congruence seems to be emerging. By George, I think we have the beginning of a group. Great. Relax your breathing. Feel the soles of your feet on the ground, connected to the earth. Now I invite you to stand up. Let's move the energy. So focusing back on the front of the room, let's get our groove back. And I'm going to invite you to turn to someone behind you, next to you, and create a spontaneous, nonverbal egg shaker conversation. You can align with their groove. You can do your own thing. You can improvise. Cool. All right, so come on back to the front of the room. You could go ahead and sit down. That's fine. Great. Beautiful. Let's get our groove back. And join voices with me. Boom shaka laka laka, boom shaka laka, boom shaka laka laka, boom shaka laka, boom shaka. Fading the voices out. Shaka laka. Fading the voices out. Keep the egg shakers going. Listen to the egg shakers. And gradually fading the sound of the egg shakers to silence. Now just savor that sensation for a moment. Can you still sense the pulsation inside your body? Beautiful. Damn nice egg shaking. All right. So my name is Gary Muzinski. The last name means music on skis in Polish. And for the last 3 decades, I've had the pleasure of bringing music making, rhythm, both as a metaphor and as an embodied experience into organizations worldwide. I've worked with more than 200,000 leaders, managers, individual contributors, partners, and for companies like Apple, Pixar, Disney, Google, Genentech, Bank of America, Chase, and for a year I worked with the North Dakota prison system. So it's been an honor bringing my love of music as a tool for healing, but also aligning and synchronizing teams and groups. And that's part of what I'm here to share with you, is that awareness, despite the feedback. Sometimes feedback is not helpful. So we know that music does many things, and it doesn't just change our mood, it also changes the way we think and perceive the world. And I know that's true for me as a musician. So I bring together the world of organizational development. You could say organizational development meets music therapy. Another way that I language it is business acumen meets creative engagement. These are different ways that I've tried to approximate a kind of hybrid work that I've developed over the last 30 years. So I would also say that music possesses the power to shift not only mindsets and moods, but also entire cultures. So music for me has 4 different powers that I have thought about and discovered as a musician and band leader and composer and producer. Music as a form of intelligence, music as a catalyst, music as medicine, and music as community, which is about social cohesion, entrainment, alignment, getting everybody on the same page. Again, we have many ways of trying to language that, but the visceral sense of being in a groove together is a very powerful experience of alignment at a cellular level. As I've translated the lessons of music making to organizations, I've thought about these 5 principles, and I've had entire organizations adopt these 5 as a framework for organizational change initiatives, leadership development, team development, etc. So the ability to orient by listening at 3 levels. We just had an experience of that with the egg shakers. You were listening to yourself, you were then creating conversations, and when there were one-on-one conversations, we kind of lost the communal groove. We got out of sync, but that was fine. We brought it back, we created the groove again, and we faded out. So just a very simple 2-minute activity on the power of rhythm to create synchronization. Orchestrating is, for me, an act of leadership. It's conducting across silos, integrating. And a number of you have mentioned how important this summit is in gathering together many different perspectives so that we can begin to learn from one another and not stay siloed. Collaborating, for me, is about facilitating essential conversations and then improvising. So I have a case study. I just want to share a case story, and then we'll have another immersive activity. But I want to give you an idea of the context and the fact that I believe that music is completely still underutilized as an intervention tool in organizations. So I worked with a large global bank. They're a household word. They're one of the top 5 banks. I won't mention their name. But I worked with them over the course of a year. And basically, their executive vice president of an entire division approached me and said, hey, we've brought in 2 mega professional service firms. They have failed to create alignment. We're on a change journey. I had worked with him before, but the thing is, he knew that my methodology worked. So he brought me in, and he said, look, A third of my leadership team is actively supporting me, a third are on the fence, and a third are silently or actively sabotaging my efforts. I know that I can't achieve our growth goals with that dynamic. And so I taught him about what I call the 5 moods. And we've touched on this already. We've touched on curiosity and passion. And I helped him understand, and his leaders, how to diagnose the primary mood on their team. Just like music, each of these moods is like a color, a mode, a type of music. And so the ROI change was basically going from 90 million in a flat growth business to 170 million in a 2-year period, which he attributed directly to our work with his team. And he embraced our concepts, and he really leveraged that. Speaking of ROI, I'd like to redefine ROI in 3 different ways: return on inspiration, return on imagination, and return on involvement. And a number of you have spoken to this already. I'm really heartened to hear about other ways of looking at value. We have one closing experience that's immersive. You may have noticed you have these plastic tubes. So grab one and let's make some sound. Okay, great. So, all right, we're going to hear from, let's just hear from each section. So the big red tubes. Great, okay. And then the orange tubes. Awesome. The yellow tubes. Okay. Awesome. Green tubes. Okay, great. Immersive audio. And then let's have the purple tubes. And then the small red tubes. Okay, awesome, great. Okay, so I'm gonna do just a little bit of call and response, and we're gonna create a piece of music together. So here we go. You guys have had a lot of coffee. Think Jamaica, not New York City for a moment. So listen to the groove. Better. Awesome. All right. So let's create a piece of music. So we're going to have the big red tubes and the yellow tubes. You're going to be playing the same piece. It goes like this. It goes bum bum ch, ch, and use your voices. Ch, yellow and big red. Ch, ch, breathing, listening. Awesome. Orange tubes. Listen. Red and yellow tubes, keep on your part. Yeah. Nice. Cool. Green tubes. Not there. Rest, rest. Here you go. Yep, that's it. Okay, orange tubes, we're going to take you out of the mix in a minute. Everybody else keep going. Orange tubes, stop. Green tubes. Small red tubes. Okay, we're going to end on 3. 1, 2. Yeah. Beautiful. So the takeaway message for me about the tubes is that no one team, no one person owns the song. The song really emerges from the interaction of the community. We created a beautiful communal groove, and that's really a lot of the wisdom that I took away from my study of African-centric music around the world. Just in closing, I want to thank Susan, Diana, and Ivy for inviting me. It's been an honor to be here with all of you. Incredible people, so much heart, such bright minds, and I feel like this is the tribe I've been looking for my whole life. So, wow. Thank you. I just want to say my last album is called Roots and Wings Medicine Music. It's global healing music with 24 master musicians from 8 countries, including Omar Sosa from Cuba and Mark Summer from the Turtle Island String Quartet, Sting's pianist Frank Martin, on and on. It is streaming for free at a cloud near you. So please take advantage of the music. And my final ask is if any of you would like to bring more collaboration and a musical metaphor and practice and framework into your organization, I'd love to talk to you about it. And I'm really curious to learn from people that are experimenting with immersive healing music, whether that's via headset or an analog experience. I'd like to find other formats for this kind of music. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you, and may the groove stay with you.
I think we should thank him again. That was really beautiful, and I got a chance to work with an artist named Prince for about 6 years, and it's just magical, amazing. You go in these concert venues, 30,000 people, 50,000 people. Everybody's all grumpy, trying to get their seats and their stuff together, and he would hit the guitar, bump, bump, da-da-da, bump, bump, and 30,000 people will be on one accord. So that power is not just for musical geniuses like Prince or Gary, it's for everybody. So just give him another round of applause. I thought it was beautiful. Well, look, I'm allegedly a provocateur. I don't know what that means. And I get a chance to talk for a few minutes about myself, and then there'll be other people who talk, and then we're going to do a panel. So that's what we're doing. And so I just want to say a little bit about where I'm coming from. I think you may underestimate yourselves. That's my observation. You may be underestimating yourselves, those of you who see yourselves as artists and people who are supporting art. The role of artists right now is possibly world-saving. It's possibly world-saving. In a normal period of time, we can rely on political leaders to help us. We can rely on our generals to help us. We can rely on our entrepreneurs to help us. But we're in a very different period of time where our political leaders are not as wise as Bill Bradley. They can barely, even in our own country, pass a budget. That's frightening. How are our generals going to protect us from school shootings and pandemics? Our safety isn't in their hands. That's different. Some of our entrepreneurs seem more interested in giving jobs to robots than people. That means we're going through a civilizational shift. This is a civilizational shift. And in those moments, it turns out that the political leaders, the military leaders, the business leaders are just as helpless as everybody else. And it takes a different group of people. It takes a different sensibility. It takes artists. It takes mystics. It takes visionaries. It takes weirdos. It takes all these people who were never taught that they were going to have this much responsibility for the human family. Often people who were pushed to the side. Often people who were left behind. Often people who were laughed at. Those are the people who it actually falls to in these rare moments, these Renaissance moments, these revival moments. And suddenly, your work matters. Who you are matters. What you see differently than everybody else, which is a source of pain for you often, is a source of promise for the whole human family. And I think it's very important for you to take yourself seriously, especially because I'm a father of two. I have 4 kids, but I've got 2 little bitty kids. One is 2 years old, one is 4 months old. So we have small diapers and very small diapers in my house. And I wonder, when they get to be our age, what is this world going to be? What is this world going to be? Civilization is an act of imagination. Civilization is an act of imagination. You got up this morning and you did certain things. You didn't go plow a field. You didn't, go and pray to the rain gods. You did certain things because there's a story in your head that's your civilizational story that gave you this day, gave you what to do. Well, what is going to happen for my children? My 2-year-old, her first crush is probably not going to be a pop star like Prince. Probably not going to be a rock star or a dashing cartoon character. Her first crush is probably going to be an AI. It's probably going to be an AI. My little guy, by the time he's 10 years old, some of his buddies might be robots. When it's time for them to give us grandchildren, they might open up a laptop with biotech or some kind of holographic interface with biotech and design my grandchildren. That's a different human civilization. In 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, God forbid, when they die, they might be buried on the moon or Mars. In 100 years, we may be a fully spacefaring civilization. So we are not just artists. You guys, you're not just artists. Our entrepreneurs, you're not just founding companies, founding funds. We are co-founders of a new human civilization. That's who we are. That's what we're doing in these decades. We are co-founding a new human civilization. And if you believe that our political leaders who no longer have your wisdom, sir, or our business leaders who seem to be motivated too often just by greed and speed, or our generals who are trying to figure out who to bomb next. If you think they should be the architects of the new millennium, then let them have it. We'll see what happens. But I think you've been called to something deeper. I think you've been called to something much more important. I think that the beauty of the human species, is this new human civilization going to be human? And is it going to be civilized? That's up to you. That's up to you in ways that you may not yet take on board. But the earth is made of stone. The earth is made of stone. The world is made of stories. If you want to change the world, you change the stories. And to do that, we need artists. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Van. That is hard to follow, but I'm going to attempt it. I'm Jill Sonke, and I'm an artist researcher. And I claim that title because I came to being a researcher as an artist. I worked in research as an artist before I shifted into being a scientist. And then I worked really hard to sort of hide that I was an artist and to be a scientist. And now in my third decade of researching, I am really eagerly claiming that title because I recognize that artists are researchers. Artists are phenomenal researchers. The ways in which we ask and answer questions methodically, deeply, holistically, and the ways in which we translate and communicate our findings and the meaning we make is incredibly powerful and important in this world. So at this stage of my researching, I claim my artist researcher identity, and I have the pleasure of working in a space that is at the intersection of arts and public health. So I work with communities. My work is very concerned with populations in the United States and communities in the United States. So I have the pleasure of co-directing the EpiArts Lab, which is a National Endowment for the Arts Research Lab. Another shout out to Sunil. With Dr. Daisy Fancourt at University College London. We've heard a bit of sprinkling of some of the research that Daisy has generated at UCL already today. Daisy and I in our lab look at the relationships between the arts and health at a population level. So we do epidemiological studies that associate arts participation of various forms and health outcomes at various forms. A lot of our work and my work is concerned with these key public health issues for which I believe the arts have very, very powerful possibilities as interventions and are well demonstrated. We also, based on our work in the EpiArts Lab, we've published 17 studies so far. And our first studies looked at who participates in the arts in the United States, the disparities in that. And unfortunately, we know the social gradients that exist in especially formal arts participation continue to persist in this country. We also know from discovering that the more people participate in the arts, even just once a month, going to things like performances, festivals, museums, we know that older adults are significantly less likely to be depressed and to have healthy aging, that young people are more likely to flourish and less likely to be lonely. So we know all of those things, and so we assert that arts participation is a health behavior. And because of the disparities that exist, we understand that access to the arts is a social driver of health, a social determinant of health. I also have the pleasure of serving as Director of National Research and Impact for One Nation, One Project, which is a truly audacious social venture project in the United States, in which 18 cities, like in the Federal Theater Project of the WPA after the Great Depression, are bringing the arts to bear to rebuild the social fabrics of communities and to demonstrate that the arts are essential to well-being and to social cohesion in communities. So these 18 communities are doing extraordinary things. You can follow on our media campaign, which is called Arts for Everybody. So on July 27 of this summer, all 18 cities, and we're working with small communities like Utica, Mississippi, Rhinelander, Wisconsin, Edinburgh, Texas, Big cities including Chicago, Washington, D.C., Oakland, Seattle, and the Bronx here in New York City. These cities have each centered artists and the arts in ideating post-pandemic recovery, and they are doing incredible things to provide opportunities for arts participation for community members. And I have the pleasure of attempting to measure that. And so we have a huge mixed method study that we're undertaking with quantitative and qualitative measures, also with arts-based measures. We're analyzing artworks and narratives. And on July 27, you will see all 18 cities tell their stories through big festivals and performances, and those stories will be woven together into a national story that hopefully will be highly visible. We're beginning to translate our learnings and findings. We have some preliminary data. One of our studies was an integrative review of the literature that looks at what we know about the relationships between arts participation, social cohesion, and well-being, which is our theory of change. And this for artists is not a new story, right? But what we've articulated from the evidence base that we can translate now to public health is that when people participate in the arts together as communities, notably when they're co-creating, and especially when these co-created activities like making performances, making exhibits, are rooted in culture, even different cultures, that relationships and belonging are enhanced, and that cultivates commitment to one another, right, to the program, and that cultivates even more participation, which builds social cohesion and in turn contributes to heightening well-being. We're seeing this play out in our statistical studies in these communities and in our qualitative studies. We're also working across the EpiArts Lab and One Nation, One Project on social prescribing, which you've heard about today. We've completed 23 case studies, which we're about to make available. And we're looking at social prescribing, and this is my ask, we're looking at social prescribing as a really important dimension, not the end-all be-all. It's amazing, and I'm working hard to make it happen at the policy level in this country because I believe it's really important. But social prescribing is one way in which people will access the arts. But I believe what's happening that is a part of our conversation today is a social movement that I sort of refer to as a seatbelt moment, right? We know in public health there were big paradigm shifts. We understood that exercise is a health behavior. We understood that wearing seatbelts was a health behavior, not smoking, good nutrition. I believe that we're in range of a seatbelt moment in which we, as Americans, and even globally, understand that like exercise and good nutrition and wearing seatbelts, participating in the arts and being creative every week is good for our health. So I think social prescribing is a part of that, and my ask to the researchers in the room is when you're translating and communicating your research, you remember to communicate to the general public, because while we are beginning to move the needle in academia, in organizations, even in policy and in funding, the general public isn't yet with us in that understanding. And I think that's an important component of the paradigm shift that we are all collectively enabling through our work. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I thought it was somebody else's coming up beforehand. You want to put this up? I'm Michael Murphy. Hi. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Ivy, Susan, Diana, thank you. And that Van, thank you for that exciting provocation. 90% of your life. Does anyone know where they spend 90% of their lives? Indoors, in buildings. 90% of our lives are in these spaces that we're in today. How are they shaping us? How are they influencing us? This idea that the spaces around us can improve or challenge or impact our bodies, our lives, our minds is sort of evident, I think, to all of us, but how it happens is not so evident. And that work, as I'm so happy we saw from Anjan and others, is starting to happen. I'm so excited about this community that's happening. I want to take you through a tour of how we've thought about this as architects and designers historically, but also maybe how we could start to see the world around us and the spaces around us anew. I began this journey by actually being introduced to one of the great buildings in the world, the Paimo Sanatorium by Alvar Aalto. This was built in 1929. In the 20s, tuberculosis was the disease taking communities apart, certainly in the 19th century, but even into the early part of the modern period. And architects like Aalto and others started to build sanatoria where we could actually get the cure. And the building's design was about getting people into the outdoors. They could have fresh air, even in the cold Finland winters. They would sit on these open porches. And the idea of the building is it actually made you healthier. And we would get the respite, get the cure by bringing sick patients here to become better. But Aalto, as a designer, was thinking not just about the body, how we breathe, he was also thinking about changing every part of the sensory landscape to improve health. He designed the interior around that primary mission. For example, he designed the corners of the closet here in the top left to be curved so that there were no corners in rooms, so you could brush sweep all the rooms and they could be cleaned very easily. When you have tuberculosis, you have to spit up a lot, the sputum collection between the sinks, these newly designed sinks that he made specifically for the rooms of the TB patients so that they wouldn't spill back to the other patients in the room. He designed new sinks to collect the sputum differently. The Aalto Sanatoria TB chair was meant to be sat in so your body is positioned and your shoulders are positioned back, almost in a position where your chest is open so that the air was hitting your chest and cleansing your body. That's why there's slats in the back. And even the door handles were hooked into the doors so doctors' coats and pockets wouldn't get pulled onto the doors themselves. I think that this is a notion of us imagining the spaces around us designed for our sensory landscape or having a spatial sense, a spatial sensitivity. And I want to talk about the spatial senses under these sort of five senses and how we might imagine the world around us and see the world anew if we kind of ask that question. How is that designed for this sense? So let's start with breath. Aalto was thinking about breath. He was thinking about how we breathe. Tuberculosis today is back. It's now called multi-drug resistant tuberculosis or extremely drug resistant tuberculosis. And especially low-income communities that are facing these drug resistant strands are stuck, wrestling with the same issues we had in the turn of the century. This was an opportunity to think about that with the great organization Partners in Health, who asked me to help design this new hospital to address tuberculosis. We went back to Aalto, we went back to the sanatoriums and thought about a building that could breathe again, something that could actually bring air right through the facility and cleanse the body. The idea of architecture, really 1 minute, architecture of breath forced us to think about how we make the structures themselves. So I want to tell the story about beginning in this corner and making it with stones and hands from this local community. And by the time we wrapped around this whole building, they were so good at putting these stones together that they asked if they could tear down the original wall and build it anew. And this is what you see, this kind of handmade, hand-constructed thing, which gives me a second lesson, which is that the structures around us are not just about how they perform, but also about the tactile sense, how they're made. That touch, must think about the touch of materiality. Touch is a big part of our built environment. Think about the great traditions of barn raising, or even, in this case, the mosques of Jenne, where the handmade and hand-mudded, annualized, ritualized construction of these things that we love are what keep them alive. We construct them, and we save them, and we were protected by them. And these examples, I think, show us ways in which the sensory landscape is affecting us in all sorts of ways. I'm going to push a little bit further, sorry. I want to talk about balance or proprioception, the way in which the built environment shapes our body. This memorial to victims of lynching in Montgomery, Alabama, which I worked on with Brian Stevenson, is all about changing the way that our body feels the history of this terror landscape in our country. We walk through this thing, we want to feel the weight above us, hanging above us, of the terror that so much of our country felt, the trauma that we feel in our bones. And if the architecture can expose that trauma and release it, we are actually given a freedom, a kind of healing freedom that can pull this out of us through the sense of our body in space, our body in time. And the idea of walking around this, being a part of this environment, feeling the compression of the roof among us, actually allows us to sort of move through this and think about healing, freedom, and release within these spaces, crucial places that change us as bodies and time. Finally, I'll just think of sight. I know Diana's giving me this. Sight. So what do we see around us? I think the last place where architecture can really shine and is so obvious, the history of the great cathedrals, for example, this is Sagrada Familia, and the sight above us, like what we see through the windows themselves, the spatialization of light actually changes the way we understand our place in the world. We might imagine ourselves as a part of something greater than ourselves, and that is the intent of these spaces, right? That we're part of a generational passing of the baton in structures built over centuries, that we can find ourselves as part of something bigger than ourselves. And that is the touching the sublime. That is the divinity in built form. And that's the opportunity we see in the architecture around us. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to be here to speak to you all today. My story is very interesting. I'm a formerly incarcerated person. I'm a visual artist now, and my journey started a long time ago in Washington, D.C., growing up, dealing with a lot of trauma, but I have been able to transform my life. And art has played a significant role in my transformation. It's really good also to be here with my brother Van Jones, who I met maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I had started my public speaking journey, and we were working with superstar Alicia Keys, and we was like, all right, Alicia's cool, but like, let's talk about work. And I remember asking Van advice on how I could become a better speaker. I told him that I would spend my nights after college going online and studying other speakers and pastors and school teachers and just trying to be a better storyteller. And I remember Van telling me, he says, brother, the fact that you do your homework and you study people who speak puts you in the top 10% of speakers. And this was the beginning of a very good relationship with Van. And since then, my life has really blossomed. And I started off, in Washington, D.C., and my mom was in an abusive relationship with a police officer who caused significant damage to my family. And, he took some of my family members away from me. And they came after me one night, and I ended up taking a person's life. And I was a child, I was 17, and I was sentenced to life in prison. And when I went away to prison, I fell into a deep depression. I was on the chess team, and I played the cello, and I was a bright young kid, but I found myself in a situation where I had to grow old and die in prison. And so it was around this time, during this battle of depression, that I wanted to really dig deep into myself and figure out who I was and how could I prove that my life was redeemable, and then how I could get out of prison again. And so I wrote up what I call to be my master plan, which is like a bucket list, all the things I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to earn a college degree. I wanted a high school diploma. I wanted to learn Spanish. I wanted to start a business one day that helped people. But most importantly, I wanted to be free again. I wanted to be free to go back into the communities that I grew up in and lead my people out of this figurative cave, out of this fake reality of like, this is my block and I'm dealing drugs. And I wanted to help show my people how beautiful the world really was. And so I spent a significant amount of time in prison, 16 and a half years. While in prison, I earned my high school diploma. I earned a college degree. I taught myself how to read and write in Spanish and Italian, and went on to study Mandarin. And I started a book club and a career center. And finally, I came home. I was homeless and unemployed, and I moved to Baltimore, and I went back to business school. And I started several companies, and I started to help people who needed help the most. And one of the things I realized from my journey was that the world isn't just about yourself. You know, when you think about your community and you think about helping other people around you, the blessings come back tenfold. And so I've been free from prison now for 12 years. I've become a successful visual artist. Thank you. I have sold my work all around the world, and I started a foundation. I started to get so many letters from people after winning many awards, and even the presidential award from Obama, and I met the Pope, and all these amazing people. And the thing that I realized was that I got to remember the people who look up to me. I got to remember the people who are following in my footsteps. And so through my foundation and through the work that I do through my art, I donate about $1 million of my earnings every year to people who need help the most. I feel like I have an obligation to pay it forward by speaking and sharing my story through my book, The Master Plan, which is being turned into a show right now. I'm working with HBO, so you guys should check the book out too. But I think events like this is really important because I started out as an entrepreneur, and I think there is some entrepreneurship involved in art, but art has really changed my life. And I live a beautiful life, and I think it's important for me to remember where I came from and to pay it forward by sharing my art. I have a show coming up next month in Georgetown, which you guys should check out. But thank you so much for giving me the platform to speak. And art is beautiful, and so I'm glad I can join you guys today.
Check. Yeah, Agape said we have to use these microphones, so I want to make sure that we do. Is Agape still here? Oh, hi, Agape. I love you, too. Agape's been one of my friends and mentors for a long time. Love you very much. And your sister, Ariana. God bless you. You are already taking seriously my admonition that art should be used to shape civilization in a good way. That's how it's used anyway. It just has to be used in a conscious way and in a positive way. So I just want to start with you. I mean, you are as hands-on as you can be. You say you're a scientist and all sort of stuff, but you're actually deeply involved in community engagement. And you showed us a little bit. I just wanted to hear more from you personally. Like, this is not easy work to do. And how are you measuring it, but also how are you feeling about it when you're doing this work?
Thank you for that question. I sort of hearkened to my age earlier. I'm 58 years old, and it's been a very liberating stage of my life, and that's come a lot into my work as a researcher. And one other piece for me when I accepted the One Nation, One Project researching gig, which meant a big shift for me in the focus of my work.
When we say shift, you mean shift from what to what?
Oh, sorry. I was directing the Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had been appointed to the CDC as a senior advisor during the pandemic, so I was really like, this was a departure. Clyde Valentine in One Nation, One Project says I ran away with the circus, because when they asked me who should research the project, I was like, me? I want to, because it was just such an exciting opportunity to step into such a bold venture at the national level with saying, communities, artists need to be at the table with problem solvers. Yeah. The wisdom of artists is as valuable as the wisdom of everybody else who gets the power and money and time and position, to solve the problem. So it was a really great opportunity to step into that. For me, it was also a great opportunity to do differently as a researcher. I've been a researcher for years, as at the end of every article says, future researchers should do better in getting broader demographic representation and involving communities and all the things that we want to do as researchers, but that we're limited in by time, funding, tenure, all sorts of things. So I brought stipulations around equity, and I wanted to build a research project that really allowed community members to own their questions, their data, and to be researchers with us. So we funded groups of community members who are our partners in the research. We did things like we worked with two amazing artists, Nizma Zaman from the Guggenheim and Derek Chung from Google, and they created an artified survey app. So that as people in communities are taking our surveys, they're having an aesthetic experience and they get their data back at the end of the survey. And
when you say an artified survey app, what does that mean? Like you go on the app and it starts singing at you? I mean, what is an artified survey app? I'm confused.
Yeah, artists made animations and characters, and so you move through this animated, a question comes up and there's animations, and you answer and you move to the next. So it's kind of artified, a little bit gamified. It's really great. But that for us is a value exchange. It's not as unpleasant to do a survey. It's pleasant.
But why do you care so much? I mean, like researchers don't care as much as you do, and I'm just trying to understand why you care so much.
We have a
Why do you care so much?
profoundly dark history of extraction in research and of harm in research in this country. And I think when I came into research as an artist, I felt really insecure and out of place, and I didn't feel like I could assert a lot. And so I was a part of, and I did research and regretfully didn't give back data when I said I would, and things like that, because again, of all the reasons we do. So I don't know, I just felt that and wanted to demonstrate, as we were trying to demonstrate nationally, the importance of artists in helping communities make the changes they want to make around their well-being, that we could also demonstrate that we as researchers could do a little better too. Not that we're great or perfect or even awesome, we're just doing better.
Well, I'll take better. I'll take better, that's for sure. Yeah, I'd like to hear from you as well, Chris. I'm going to get to you, Chris, at the end. I want to hear from Michael first. So, first of all, you made me feel bad because you said I spent 90% of my time indoors. It might be 95% if we had all the airplane flights. And that feels like unfreedom. I'm going to get you on freedom in a second. That feels like unfreedom. And so what do you think we can do about it? I mean, you're in a position where you can make whole new buildings and that type of stuff, but you got a bunch of people here. How can we make either our lived environment better, more nourishing, more successful? What do you do in your house? And then do you encourage us to get outside more? Just talk a little bit about that, because I was traumatized by the first slide.
I'm sorry, Van. We'll release some of that trauma right now. Well, I think we all experienced it, right? We all had this collective international experience during COVID where suddenly we were all trapped inside. And we wouldn't go outside, or we could go outside for fresh air. We wouldn't be with community. We wouldn't go to the offices, and we were in our homes. And this idea that the buildings around us are shaping us was evident to all of us. I don't know if we all recognize it, but I think we all went through a collective spatial awakening a few years ago, where you were starting to ask questions, we all were, about how could the spaces around us be better, serve us better. Like, these windows are open now, which is a big deal. And I say a simple thing like opening windows is actually a transformative, radical act right now in our buildings, because our buildings are sealed, right? The air conditioning in here is defined by a universal sort of standard meant to circulate a certain amount of air, which is insufficient in a condition like COVID. So we are actually in the middle of a spatial awakening, and I think what that means is we can actually be asking harder questions about how these spaces around us can serve us better. And breathing and sense, I think, are the places where we begin.
Well, I'm a big fan of breathing, so I appreciate your advocacy for it. But asking the questions is one thing, but what are the answers? Like, is your house really cool?
It's all right. Yeah.
Like what can people do to live up to what you're talking about? Because it is, I think there was a spatial awakening, and then there was a spatial back to sleeping after we. So what should we do? Give us some advice. So you got people who are very, very creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think first is to notice, right? To notice that we can change and have some agency over where we are, and if we can't control it, to push back. So policy change, I think, is next. Like, We should be demanding that our housing is not just healthier, but that is safe for the environment, right? That performs better for our communities. And these sorts of things can be pushed into policy. Second, we inherit a lot of the spaces that we're in. We don't get custom designed. I don't live in a custom designed house. It was designed for another family. So we can adapt it to our own needs. I have 2 young children, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. They own the house, right? You know, they tell you how the house works and how it doesn't work. And it's informing me about how we need to live as a family and what we might be looking for out there in the space. So we're kind of stewards of our environment, of our built environment through a period of time. And how do we become good stewards of that? And last, I think every building is a narrative device. It's telling a story. It was designed for a specific reason, and it's best for us to understand what that reason is. Even if that reason no longer is relevant, it made sense at that period of time and in that context and that place, and kind of teaches us about where we live.
Oh, I want to talk with you afterwards, because first of all, our kids are close to the same age, and I want them to breathe good in my house. So, Chris, I've known you for a long time. I've known you for a long time. You're one of the people I admire the most on this planet, and you barely even touched on just the incredible transformative effect that you've had on so many people. Most people, when they come home from prison, they're trying to get a job. You came home trying to give people jobs and help and support and inspiration and art, et cetera. Could you just pick one thing just to give people like a sense of maybe the way that that you're using art right now to change lives, or the way that art's being used in the system, or just anything else that you think would give people a little bit more depth in what you've been up to?
Yes. I think, so I stumbled upon the art world kind of serendipitously. And while I was in business school, I would go to my artist friends who are ultra super successful artists. Most of them live here in New York now. And I would just sit with them, and they would tell me about the paintings. And I was a designer. I had a construction company, and I wasn't really interested in art. And I thought it was fascinating. And I remember my artist friends telling me that art's all around us. They started telling me, like, the business of art. I was in business school at the time. I had just deferred from Harvard Business School. And they were saying, like tax benefits and all these things. And I was like, you sold this painting for how much? $1 million? Somebody gave you $1 million for this? And I just started to learn about it, and I became fascinated with the art world. And I started thinking about my role in my community as a social entrepreneur, and struggling because I was, formerly incarcerated, trying to get a line of credit with banks, and no one wanted to deal with me. And I figured out that if I chose this path to make art and travel the world, and work for myself, I can raise money to do the work that I wanted to do. And, and since then, just under 300 paintings, I think, sold across 25 countries. And starting my foundation, it gave me the power and leverage to give people jobs, to be an example, to go back to the community that I grew up in, and people see someone who was dealt a bad hand but turned their life around. And it just gave me a lot of, just gave me a lot of leverage to help so many people. And so I'll never stop.
Well, the level of appreciation the community has for you, not just in Baltimore, but just period, it can't be overstated. So the impact of art on one person, the impact of art on the built environment, the impact of art on community, and what communities know about themselves. That's just a piece on a part of, I think, what's available to people who take art seriously. I think Gary did a beautiful job as well, showing what music can do. My team is going to be very mad at me because I didn't say anything about the work that we're doing. But what I will say is, Kalia, will you just stand up and turn around? Just give this woman a round of applause. This is Kalia. We're doing really beautiful work now, getting communities that are distressed and depressed empowered through AI at Dream Machine. We're bringing Black and Jewish folks together. We've been fussing and fighting too much. We're 100 years together, Black and Jewish folks. Created something together called American Democracy, Black and Jewish folks. We cannot keep fighting, so we're bringing these communities back together, and many, many other things by changing the stories. Changing the stories of community. Who can these communities be? Can we make Wakanda real? Can we have a new Exodus together? This is the power of storytelling, the power of art, and the power of this panel. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.